Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel on changing the dynamics of application security. I'm John Walter. I will be moderating this panel and making sure that you all have what you expect out of this discussion. We are lucky to have three great panelists in this discussion. But before I enter into this, the details of our presenters, I have a few things to ask to the audience. We want this to be interactive. We want this to be tailored to you. So there will be a number of polls during the presentation. We want you to take some time to input because this feedback is very important for us and for the discussion we will have in the future. So please do contribute to this discussion by answering the polls. There is also on your right side for Q&A, and this is again a very big ask. Please do not hesitate. Please ask your question. We have three great minds participating with us who can come and help you. So just take some time to contribute and ask your questions. We will spend 15 minutes at the end of this session to discuss and to answer your question as we have. And before we get into the midst of the discussion, I want to do a small shout out and thank Synopsys who is sharing with us reports they've done recently on application security. And again, you have access to it in the handout section. Just take some time to download it and read it. That's very insightful information for security and for the appreciation of security program. So take some time to read this handout, download it before this session is over. Please contribute to the Q&A and to the polls. We will start the first question right now. And please take some time to answer so that we can have a discussion that is meaningful to you. And without further ado, I'd like to go and present the three panelists we have today. We're lucky to have a very diverse industry background and diverse experience background. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Baljit Singh, who is the head of cybersecurity strategy for the group Axiata. Baljit, do you mind sharing a few words and introduce who you are? What do you do?
Sure. Hi, my name is Baljit. I'm based out of Malaysia. I am the cybersecurity strategy and architecture head for Axiata. Axiata is a telco company operating out in Asia. I've been in security and technology for a good 22 years now. And my role is setting the direction and strategies for cybersecurity in Axiata and our operating companies to make sure we are, approaching our clientele better and at the same time trying to make our environments more secure.
And for people who might not be from Malaysia and might not be familiar with Axiata, do you mind sharing what Axiata does?
Axiata is a telco company, so to speak, a digital company. So what we do is we operate telcos around Asia. We have presence within Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Cambodia. And also on top of that, we are a digital company as well. We have a digital front where we have a online payment scheme. We have an e-wallet that we have called Boost. We also have a tower-based company that manages over 70,000 telco towers across the region. So our presence is diverse. We are in a telco space, but we're also in a digital space at the moment.
Pretty impressive. That must be a challenge to secure all that. Our second panelist is Yaron Slutsky, who is a Chief Security Officer for Group Agoda. Yaron, do you mind telling a few words about you?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Yaron Slutsky. I'm currently the CISO for Agoda, OTA business in the travel industry. And obviously, we have tough times these days, but we hope to get out of it very soon. We are a part of the Booking Holdings company, which is probably the largest travel company in the world. Our main market is obviously the Asia APAC market. We're dealing with flights, hotels, homes, everything that we can give to our customers. And we are eventually e-commerce company, as well as a kind of a fintech company, because we're dealing also with our own payments, credit cards. My experience is mostly I come from the security area. being a CISO for telecom companies, e-commerce company, manufacturing companies. And today I'm located here in Thailand, in Bangkok. Thank you.
That's great. Well, we all hope that travel and booking will resume soon. If not for Agoda, for all of us. That would be a good solution. And our last panelist is not the least, Jan Hall, who works for Synopsys. And Jan has, as a vendor, visibility on a number of companies. So that's very insightful information. I know because I've worked for a vendor for the last 2 years. That's tremendous value. Jan, tell us more about you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ian Hall. I'm the head of client services at Synopsys Software Integrity Group. And in client services, what we do is we help customers get onboarded and start using our products. We have a wide range of products from SAST, IAST to software composition analysis, DAST, whole host of tools. So we help customers get on board. We make sure that they're getting good value from it. We help them mature and make sure that it's being plugged into their DevSecops pipelines well. And yeah, that's what we do. I'm also based in Hong Kong right now.
Good. So we're very diverse locations that kind of represent what Asia is, spread across very diverse background, very diverse expertise. And that's what makes it so vibrant. Let's start with a first question, and just simply let's look into. We hear a lot about DevSecops. It's been on the words of many people and many thought leaders for the last 2 to 3 years. And I'd like to hear what is your view of DevSecops? How does it change the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, and what's changing in the last few years? Maybe why don't we go with Baljeet to begin with?
Okay. I think what's changing over the last few years is the speed and the degree where applications are pushed out. That's one thing that's changing. The medium where applications are used is also changing. People are on the mobile device now. People are more in tune with applications. People are more in tune with information. So if you ask me, compared to the 5 years ago, we have seen great strides in terms of people using mobile devices now to access applications, and more so during the pandemic, where people have to start using those devices for online ordering and getting day-to-day activities done. So that, to me, has spewed a lot of demand on the development lifecycle to churn out code quickly. And what we are seeing as a technology company is how can we address that better, faster? Everybody speaks about agile, but agile is more about coming out with something that's safe. So DevSecops blends that. DevSecops tries to look at how best we can bridge coming out with something good, but at the same time making sure it's safe, making sure it's not manipulated by opportunist people to gain information or to actually start frauding. So where I see the shift is the stress that we have in terms of meeting business needs, meeting not just business needs, but meeting consumer needs, right? In terms of giving them the right information at the right time and accurately. So security plays an important role in that. Security tries to make sure, traditionally at the end of the life cycle, you go to the security team and they have to review the code, they have to review the changes, and they have to actually start understanding all the thought process and the decisions that have been made, to the point that they have to reverse everything and slow down the development cycle. Where I see things are headed now is a mesh where developers are empowered to understand security first, and from there start building secure code from the beginning. So this is my vision, and this is what we're trying to do in Axiata. Sorry, Jerome, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you for the answer. Very insightful, and that's very something I absolutely personally agree with. Yeah, and you are the vendor, so you work with many customers. Do you see a different approach in what DevSecops is for Synopsys or for your customers today? Is there something on top of it that you think is important for everyone?
I mean, I definitely agree with Baljit when he's talking about the speed and more ownership from developers. But actually, what I also see is, many years, well, not many, but a few years ago, everyone is talking about shift left. I think that's, everyone has heard that, it's done to death. But I think actually what we're seeing now is more like shifting everywhere. So you've got your security tools, but you're not just putting it, you're not just doing your SaaS during development. You're actually doing it during all different phases of your life cycle. So you've got in the planning stage, you could be doing threat modeling, understanding which features or which applications, how can it be attacked. So then you can what are the risks for that application. So then you can choose the tools and how to use those tools. Then, of course, during the development, as I said, you've got SaaS. You're also looking at managing your open source. What are the risks that you're getting from open source? You've got an SCA tool in there as well. Then you continue. You got test phase. You're still doing penetration testing. It could be you've got your own internal teams. Maybe you're getting some external experts to come in. You're doing a mix of that. You've also potentially, depending on your type of application, you maybe at the API level, API scanning or fuzz testing. In the next phase, you're looking at deployment where you're doing vulnerability scanning, or maybe you're talking with your cloud vendors. Are you looking at secure configuration there? And then finally, even in operations, you're still doing things like red teaming. You're still doing additional testing there, and it's just about if you're fast, if you can do things fast, you're also like fixing, triaging them, and getting them into production, like Baljit said. So yeah, so I think security has moved from just like the shift left. Now it's almost everywhere that you're seeing that. Yeah.
Thank you, and I love how you highlight the fact that it's not only shift left, it's right, shift everywhere, and operations is should be part of a discussion on security. I usually joke saying that you don't have security incident if you're not in production, right? So, and so that's usually the challenge we hear with customers who've had a lot of friction, a lot of difficulty between doing all those security checks, making sure that the software is perfect, is solid before going to production, having all those tests to make sure that things work. And so there is this challenge of balance between speed, developers who want to push code and features as fast as possible, and security who needs to ensure that things are secure, are well done, and that the whole team is able to react and all those things. So I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts, and maybe we'll start with Yaron's. Like, how do you find this balance between enabling security to ensure all those controls are in place, and enabling the developers to deploy? Yaron?
Yep. Yes, so if I will continue the first question you had, and one of the things obviously that we see more of companies that they are moving either to a cloud or either hybrid, let's say, solution, and they are starting to use a lot of Dockers and Kubernetes and all other new infrastructure in place, let's say, and they are using a lot of open source these days. And companies are deploying, if it used to have like 10 updates in a week, now it's like 10 updates in a day. So we are in a security, it's hard for us to follow up and make sure that every code that they are developing is secure. So we have to find a way how to integrate our security, let's say, maturity, security tools, or security design in the pipeline of the developers, which is obviously the CI/CD pipeline. And they need to make sure that they need to understand, the developers, that they are a part of it. It's not that we are different teams. We are working together, and eventually we have one goal to make sure we are delivering, let's say, a code, which is eventually a feature or a software that it's giving the business needs, but it's also secure, that will not have any breaches or any attacks or happening on our system. So if they will understand it, that we are a part of it, and we need them in order to make sure that we are secure and we are developing securely, either with the SaaS, Dust, automations that we're providing them, but it has to be a combination of both teams to make sure we have one goal, and it's to deliver those code on time without any security bugs. Because if we looked 5 years ago, they used to develop, then it used to come to us, to the security team. We asked them, we need 1 week in order to follow and make sure if it's secure or not. They don't have time these days to wait 1 week. They have maybe 1 day to wait for these results and to continue their development and deliver to the production. So I would say the balance should be, for us, for security guys, never stop the business going forward, and never stop developers to delivering on time their codes. But not yet said, they have to make sure that it's secure once they are developing it with tools, solutions, even in-house, let's say a triage or in-house risk, let's say a measurement to understand what is the actual risk releasing this code as it is now, or let's say understanding the bugs and the risk there, and release it on time. So I would say, I believe that most of the companies these days believing that security is not just another team to stop the business. We are working all together and we have one goal to deliver this security and on time without stopping the business and without stopping the developers, because there was always, let's say, more dev stuff to do than security stuff, So that's, I would say, the main balance that we need to do inside our company.
So that means that eventually you will ship code with non-vulnerability into it, right? Is that something that has always been true in the mindset of Agoda, of this ownership of developers and saying, yes, okay, we understand, we will fix it right away, but our business priority is to ship now? Has it always been true, or is it something that you've built? And if you've built it, is there any aspects that you found works better and that our audience could take away and experiment themselves?
Yeah, so Agoda is existing a lot of years. So I would say, obviously, in the beginning when we were more of a startup, it was less obviously like that. But once we grow and we started to be like a part of a big company, so we had to change our culture, from how developers works, and to put the security, which is obviously working together with the DevSecops team, to make sure that they are delivering everything before production securely, and making sure there is, secrets or any input validation issues. So they're checking everything pre-commit, let's say, and it's mostly an automated way, because if we will do it manually, I never have enough people to do everything manually. So it has to be part of the CI/CD pipeline, which is automated, that checks all the security holes and bugs, and then deliver it on time, let's say with the triage of the security risks into it, and deliver it to the business.
Sounds like a well-oiled machinery. And I'd love to hear what Baljit does in his company. Just right before I realized we didn't start the first poll a few minutes ago, so we're going to start the first poll now. We really want to hear from the audience. That's very important for us to make sure that our experience is relevant to you. So please share with us whether, when you're adapting those application security, what do you consider the most important? And then right now we're going to ask Baljit to share with us what he thinks is the most important for his company, and what he thinks works the most in finding this balance between security and speed. Baljit, do you share the views of Yaron, or is there anything specific that comes with Axiata's context? And
I think a lot of people in the industry share that same view with Yaron. Right. End of the day, it's about balancing what business needs and what are we trying to address. But from that point onwards, we did a little bit of thinking in terms of, because we've got 10 opcos doing their own development with their own apps that's equally successful. How do we change that mechanisms? How do we have their own respective CI/CD pipelines, they have their own multiple development teams, all within each one opco. And our subsidiaries is what we call an opco. So the the process that we came up with, and Ian and Yaron, I really like what you guys touched on, because you talk about shift everywhere, which is true. And Yaron, you talked about governance and moving from a small organization to a big organization, which is also very valid and true. To me, the whole idea around this is governance. It's a process, and I know a lot of people said, are you going to adopt the process in an agile environment or within a CI/CD pipeline? But we have to start thinking about how we manage, and the same akin to IT management. You have an asset register and an asset list. We want to do the same thing for our applications, even our APIs. Come up with a proper asset list to give us an understanding. How is it used? Where is it used? Who is using it? What kind of data sets run through it? And from there, we can actually taper our risk-based approach to those kind of most confidential things that we want to protect the most, versus small apps that are more for promo and more for advisory and stuff like that. So this is the approach that we're taking. We are actually taking a step back from the agile process in the DevOps process. And also some people are saying, hey, you're going back to the waterfall days. And yes, to some extent, because it's around governance. If you have an idea of what apps you're using, where you're keeping it, what are the components, what are the inputs and outputs, I say you're better and more ready to react to an incident or to react to risk as compared to not knowing what's being developed as you start growing.
That's a very good point. I mean, governance has a bad image nowadays. But
that's true.
But if you look at the bottom line, is really making sure that you know what you're doing and you prioritize where it matters, and that's very important, especially for a large group where you can't do everything at the same urgency. And that's interesting. The feedback from the audience is that for them, the overwhelming priority when they go on AppSec is the integration with existing process. And earlier, Budget, you mentioned, the view of DevOps and DevSecops is create empowered teams, and actually that's what DevOps was about, right? Create autonomous, empowered teams who are fully able to manage their projects and their process. How do you come up to that? Is letting developers or letting product teams take ownership of security, so that finding this balance so that they don't throw everything back to the security team saying, hey, it's in prod now, monitoring and security is your problem, right? How did you come up to this challenge?
One of the things that we are looking at doing is empowering the development teams. First and foremost is by understanding, the minimum secure coding practices. Secondly, we want them, so we feel that it starts at the root, and they are the root. So if they understand secure coding practices, that's very important. They will make an effort to do it. Secondly, it's getting them to be the ambassadors of security. We've tried many ways for security to come into the CI/CD pipeline, into the whole value chain, but there have been very mixed responses, because the simple answer is, you guys don't know all about coding and you don't know about the whole life cycle. I started off in coding at one point long time ago, but I admit it has changed so much so that security, they should be empowered to understand security first. Then that's what we're trying to do in Axiata.
It's really insightful and interesting information. And you mentioned earlier the governance aspect. So I'm going to have a poll for the audience, and before people in the audience answer this poll, please ask questions. I see this question list being awfully empty. I can't believe that no one has any question regarding security and how to improve security. So please ask your questions. And before we enter further discussion, we have a second poll regarding your software security initiatives. So please take a second to answer whether it is, so that we can have information and discussion that are relevant a little bit later. So let's take a minute, and then we're going to move on to a to a slightly different topic. Okay, so we've looked at, how do we move, how do we balance security and speed? We mentioned that governance is actually important in finding this balance. And what would you consider best practices on making sure that you don't let everyone just ship codes, and what would be the most important, the best practice on getting visibility on the quality of what is being released and the security, while not blocking production release? What is your application security cheat sheet, best practice cheat sheet today? Maybe I'll take a minute with Jan first, because as a vendor, you have visibility on a diverse number of customers. You have a portfolio that helps customers along the journey. What would you think? What would you recommend customers to start with in terms of building best practices for application security?
Yeah, I think I do echo what Balchit said again, and also Yaron, in that having the ownership is really important. And I think that very first step organizations should do is, what applications do we have? If you don't know what you have, what are you trying to secure? You can't even get started. But once you know what applications you have, I think then it comes down to finding what are best practices, what are the things, what are the initiatives that you should have. And I think that there's different ways to do this, right? But one of the ways that I would recommend, Synopsys has a framework called BSIM. It's Building Security in Maturity Model. And so what it enables you to do is to compare yourself against others in the industry. What are the actual activities that these organizations are doing? So there's hundreds of security activities divided into different practices. We've ranked them. What are most companies doing? What are some companies doing? And what are a few companies doing? And so this is real data based on assessments that Synopsys has done. It's not just a wish list of things that we think that organizations should do. These are really what organizations around the world are doing. And although we do the assessment, it is actually just openly available. You can actually go and download it and do your own assessment and see where you are. And basically what you can then do is you can figure out, most organizations are doing these initiatives or these activities. Maybe I should be doing them too. But you still then need to assess, is this best practice good for me? In short, it gives you the visibility you need in your organization to protect your assets, with taking into account that everyone's got limited time, right? And I think that then the next benefit, of course, is that it gives you a benchmark of where you are. So if you're at the earlier stages of your AppSec transformation or journey, you can set your benchmark, and then maybe in a year's time you can do it again. You can take a look and then see how you've progressed. Then you can go to I don't know, your CISO and say, or your CEO and say, we've improved by this much. You can see it. You can see it in the graphs. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and absolutely. BSIM, I love the fact that you have an actual database of feedback so that you can benchmark yourself against your industry, and it's not like general, it's per industry, so you can benchmark and see what are the activities to be done. Yaron, you're on the in-house building security. What is your cheat sheet on your side? Where would you start? If you were starting again today security, where would you start? And as you've matured a little bit for more organizations that are matured like yours, where do you think is the most valuable best practice today for you?
Yeah, so obviously it depends if I'm coming to, like a new startup company or enterprise corporate company. It would be probably different technique, let's say. But if I would need to have something from scratch, I would probably build, the right teams first. It's either the AppSec / the DevSecops teams, which will work very closely with the developers to design the best CI/CD plan, let's say, for also to add the security part on top of it, and not only the DevOps part, to make sure that the security is in the same area in each part of, let's say, the CI/CD pipeline, to make sure that it's a part of it and everything we need from a security perspective without stopping, and the business going forward and fast and scalable. So it has to be probably a lot of self, or I wouldn't say self, but probably a lot of in-house, let's say, architecture and developing to adjust to the existing CI/CD pipeline, and to make sure also with the developers that they are understanding how to write, let's say, a secure code. It obviously will bring much better results on the, on the daily basis. And of course, also, we also have eventually the risks that we need to understand how to measure them, because we probably will find tons of vulnerabilities, tons of bugs on open source or commercial tools. So we need to understand how to triage all the different bugs and all the different vulnerabilities that we have in order to, what's the best way to close them very fast. And with the risk on top of it, to understand what is actually a risk to the company and what are, let's say, low risk that they are just nice to have to fix and close the bugs. So I would say that's in general, the best practice in general. I'm just hoping that everyone heard me.
No, I think very very useful. I think no one can disagree on those activities. What assessment do you use? Do you use PSIM? Have you customized your own framework of what are the of maturity assessments? How do you benchmark and making sure that you have the right approach, and that you, for some regulated industry, you're able to prove that you're doing the right thing?
Yeah, so it's a combination. Obviously, we have some commercial tools, some open source tools, and some in-house, let's say, dashboarding and integrations that we build in our CI/CD pipeline that we use in order to get the best results and, let's say, the best triage to understand exactly what's the risk and what is actually risk to the business and what is not or less. So, those teams that work very closely with the developers, they are working to be a part of their, let's say, sprints, from a part of their scrums, to make sure that they are, they have a KPI that is together with the developers, and that way everyone is in the same ship, and they need to make sure that they deliver it in the right way. So again, just to make sure, it is some commercial tools that we are not gonna invent the wheel. There are some very good commercial tools that we can use. Some open source tools, for example, we are using all the dashboards, for example, in a open source tool that just provides from different sources the entire risks, either it's vulnerabilities, bugs, secrets, or whatever we decide it's important for the business. And we have like a dashboard for a CISO, let's say, that I can see in a real time what are the actual risks at each day, exactly with all the findings that we found on that day. So it's a combination of, again, commercial, in-house developing, and open source tools.
Thank you. I see from the result of the poll that we have 50% of the audience who has formalized and published software security initiatives. That's very interesting. I remember having a discussion a few years ago about SSI, and I think most of the audience didn't know what it is. So we have a good improvement here. Very, very balanced. So we have 50% of the audience who also doesn't have a published SSI. So I'll extend the discussion regarding assessment, because it's today something we see a real struggle, right? If you want to go the pure agile, you want to remove friction, it's always a question of all those assessments require time, required to add, control points and other things which might create friction. So let's start with a last audience check and start with a poll to understand better on, how does the audience does the assessment? How do you measure whether you're following those practices? So we take a minute for this poll, and then I'd love to hear from Baljit what formal assessments you're doing on maturity of your application security practice in Axiata, and is there anything you would recommend to the audience of the people who are just starting, or for people who have already matured a certain amount? Is there anything that you find very useful in the assessments, or just not that useful.
Are we on the poll, or shall I start the answer?
I think you can start, as if I have enough time to answer.
Okay. If you ask me, and if you're starting out, what I did was, everybody, if you go into a process, if you go into a traditional IT, the common knowledge would be, hey, let's get a tool and start running it. The tool is our holy grail. It gives us insight to everything that we need to know, and we can respond to it. But actually, I look at it as the tool is something that helps supplement a process that we're trying to achieve. So in order for the process to start working, you need to have exactly what you need. You need to have a standard in place and a minimum security set per platform that you use. And when I say platform, I mean platform in production, platform to code, platform to develop. You need to have minimum standards in terms of how you want to protect your environment. So that goes beyond just development, but it goes into the infrastructure side of things. Then from there, I would recommend you latch on to someone who can understand your environment and give you advice around it. So that's what we did. We actually went out to our consulting firms around there. There's a lot of consulting firms. We also went to Gartner. We also went to Forrester, and we actually sought advice in terms of what are the other people in the industry doing, right? And having that big buddy or having that big brother who sees a lot of aspects in the industry and how it's shaping, giving you advice, sure, that's good. And we actually, you always take advice with a pinch of salt. You need to apply it into your organization. Your organization usually has tweaks and kinks about it that makes it your organization. It's personalized. So we took that, we built a framework, and we got our development teams to understand that framework, how and where it interacts with their CI/CD pipeline. What are the key components that's needed? One of the big things that we talked about earlier was working from the root. And one of the things that I always believe in is when you start building a solution, integrate security into it. Get your architects who are doing the product development team to build security upfront. It's not hard that way because it comes as a requirement. They think you're a pain, right? More often than not. But if we come up with standards for this platform, this coding, and from there we start reusing secure codes or and have a secure repository to actually start reusing that secure code that we've created, we will start ramping up our production back to square one. So that's my thoughts in terms of how I go about coming up with advice for someone who wants to start doing this now. Come up with standard, look at OWASP, find a big buddy out there who can actually start introducing things. Because it's not just coding and it's not just security. It's something, it's a hybrid between the both.
Indeed. Yeah, and you do a lot of those assessments with many customers. Is there anything that you see working better or points of friction on doing assessment with some of the customers that any CISO or executive would have to bear in mind that is maybe not as straightforward as just engaging you?
Well, I think that just acknowledging that you should start with having a roadmap, having a plan, and doing an assessment. I think Axiata sounds like a customer I would want to have, because I've been into customers where they've purchased a tool, so they've bought SAST, and the reason that they've bought it is just because that they want the tool. They think that security means we need to buy a tool, and although it might sound strange coming from a vendor, because we're making money off a license sale, but it makes our implementation quite difficult, because they don't know how it's going to fit into their environment. They don't know the types of rules they want to use, and they end up asking us okay, you draw us a diagram of how this should fit together. And it invariably then also means that do they have the support of their developers, and are they going to really buy into this tool when it's been implemented? So so I think having that plan is a good thing, and it helps you use your tools better when you are going to spend money. But I think the assessment doesn't necessarily have to be something that you pay for. Of course, it can be, right? And getting those experts in are good, but you could do your own evaluation internally. But I mean, having said that, if I was to say, where would most organizations start? For what I see, I think mostly organizations when they come to buy tools from a vendor like Synopsys, I think most of them really start with SAST, and I think that something like Coverity. Why that is I think that it covers more of their applications at once. So it covers all different applications in the end have source code, and it will cover different languages, frameworks, types of applications, things like that. But I think it's really up to the organization to figure out where to go, because I've seen data in surveys that Synopsys have done where each tool is only used by up to, I think, 40% of organizations. So 30 to 40% have SaaS, 30 to 40% have SCA, web app firewalls and things like that.
That's good. Well, we have basically 50% of the audience who have done an assessment in the last year. So Jan, you must have been very busy during all those assessments. And it's common mistake or a common thing to see people looking for a tool, because doing an assessment is one thing, but I think in the mind of a lot of people is just making sure you don't produce the vulnerability and you don't push it to production might be a more urgent matter for many of the options. And since we have a little bit more time, I'd like to hear everyone's. We've been talking about this DevSecops transformation for the last 40 minutes, and I think the application security, we all agree, has changed a lot. Baljit mentioned the urgency of releasing fast has really pushed with all those digital transformation initiatives. But there was also a big transformation happening in the last 5-10 years, depending on how quickly you got on it, which is cloud. And cloud might not be an application security matter, but did the cloud change the way you look at application security? And what are the challenges you had to face when moving towards existing application, but on the cloud? And maybe let's start with the company we expect to be online facing, and with Agoda. Yaron, did the cloud change something for you?
Yeah, so first, obviously, definitely, it was a big change. We used to be an on-prem company, and we used to manage most of our data centers on our own, in our own codes. And yes, we did start a couple of years moving, and migrating to the cloud. So I would say from a security attack surface, the challenges were changed because of that. We used to manage our own hardware, our own operation systems. Now that everyone is moving to a private cloud / public cloud, never mind what's the situation, it's changing, because now we move to virtual operation system, to virtual your service. So, each service has its own kind of operation system on top of it. And it starts to become much more difficult for us, the security guys, to see to have visibility, what's going there, what is moving. If the attacker is already inside the pod, how is doing lateral movement between them. So it is becoming much, much more challenging from a security perspective. And I believe from let's say a security application security, it's also obviously much more changing, because people are developing in, let's say, sometimes in a new code languages that we haven't heard before. They're using much more open source tools that we didn't develop. We're just using it and maybe just added some features to it, but it's an open source solution that we don't know who used to use it before. And maybe there are a lot of bugs and vulnerabilities to it, or even maybe backdoors to it. So it's becoming very challenging to how to deal with all of these changes in the company. And sometimes people think, okay, I'll move to cloud, and that way I will be more secure. But let's be honest, it's not really the answer. It's just a different secure method that you need to handle now. So that you need to remember what is the risks for your company, and especially for an internet company. It's for us it's maybe the same that we're an internet-facing company, but all the backend is totally different, and we need to deal with it every day and to make sure that it's securely and all the public and the different let's say services that we are getting from those cloud providers are handling correct, and we have the visibility and we have the resource that understand what's the risks on those areas. And I would say it's still challenging. I can't say that everyone is still 100% sure what's the best way and what's the best practices to deal with. It's true that today you have a lot of, let's say, training and certification from those public companies, cloud-based solutions. But still, the security guys have still a lot of work to handle, and it is much more challenging times, I would say.
Thank you. Baljit, I see you smiling, so I'm sure you have an opinion. But in addition to, additional threat landscape, which I think everyone would agree, did you see any opportunity with the cloud, right? Well, first is where is your position on the cloud today, but is it only a challenge, or have you seen any opportunity with the cloud? I know I have a personal opinion on this one, so.
Personally, I see the cloud as an enabler for us to deliver services faster. But that has, from a security terms, that has sometimes gone to misuse, because people turn on the cloud, push things on the cloud, and sometimes because of its ease and speed, people circumvent certain processes that you already have in the environment from day one. In a traditional data center, you build up with your firewalls, your controls, and stuff like that, even access. A cloud, I can go online in the next 30 minutes and have something up and running, servicing the people if I market it correctly. But the problem is with the cloud comes with a lot of appreciation and understanding. We are working with all 4 cloud providers as we speak. And when I say 4, I mean, the AWS, the Google, the Azure's, and also the Alibabas, to actually get them to help us build that cloud standard, that cloud framework in terms of managing what are the key security check marks or enablers that we need to put in, what are the controls. Like Azure has something called just-in-time security. So those are the things that we are enabling, we are controlling from the cloud. And Yaron, you mentioned it exactly to the point. All 3 or all 4 vendors have a different terminology to use, have a different product set that does the same thing. And instead of traditional having a guy doing one set, now he has to have 5 or 6 data centers with different technologies to actually sit and maintain and manage the same business processes from the security perspective. So to me, if I don't define, it's very hard for me to get the ball rolling. So we've adopted the approach where we built out a playbook we came up with, and this is something that we worked internally, collectively together with the development teams to say what are the controls that we need to actually put on the cloud. So in Axiata, we practice the NIST framework. We measure ourselves on the NIST framework and we adopt the NIST framework. So putting it to the cloud was somewhat easy because a lot of the cloud providers were doing it, but customizing a checklist and making it operational, that is a challenge, right? Because it's early days. It's still very early days in the industry. So yeah, that's my thoughts. It can be done, but it needs some work.
I'm hurt no one mentioned cloud native. I've been working on cloud native for the last 2 years, and you mentioned every cloud, but not the cloud native architecture. But anyway, in the interest of time, and because we really want to make sure that the audience gets gets feedback in the burning question, I'd like to move to the Q&A and take some time to answer some of the questions that were asked by the audience. And we have quite a few, and we have some pretty long. So I'm gonna just take a second to read them to try to summarize some of them. Okay, so One is we have a lot of security standards, MSVS, MSUT, we have BISIM. So security doesn't have a lack of best practices. What would be the recommendation of a best practice to follow for non-security professionals? This is a very interesting question. How do we make sure that non-security professionals understand what they need to do from a security perspective? And let's start with Ian. As an external point of view, not building your own security, but the customer security, what would you recommend we address on making sure that we measure and we enable best practice for people outside of the security department?
Well, I think when it says non-security professional, maybe referring to developers or end users, because I think it could be different, right? So if you're talking about developer end, something that you could do and that we recommend is it's around what we've talked about already, like getting security more embedded in the organization, including developers. But you could have security champions where you identify specific people that are not part of security team, but they've got an interest or they've taken additional training, so they become the security champion in the development group, and they can help spread the word and spread the knowledge in there. I mean, then. Of course, then the other things is that if you've got correct tools in place, maybe you're identifying defects, you need to be able to look at those defects, and then you get an understanding of what type of defects you're seeing for your developers. Then you're able to kind of tune training for those developers, and in that way, improve the fixing, and also then maybe next time they're going to write code with high quality right from the start. Because I believe one of the biggest challenges organizations face is that your developers don't always have the knowledge that they need to fix the defects that are found.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the developer side, making sure they are trained on security is, you can't underline so much in terms of productivity. We've highlighted the importance of reducing friction and reducing time lost. So there's nothing better than a vulnerability that was never written in the first place. So that's better than actually catching it early. The best is to not write it. And so, Yaron, you've talked earlier briefly about security education. Is there anything that you think works best in terms of educating the non-security people? So let's take a minute on developers, and if you think of things to be done on the rest of the audience, of the corporate audience, is like, what would you recommend in terms of best practice for getting non-security people to do better security?
Yeah, sure. So first, I agree with Ian that security champions, sometimes it's quite a good, let's say, people that you can find, in hackathons or any kind of something you do to try who wants to learn and be a part of the security, let's say, posture. So security champions, we are using those, and it's very useful because we have different offices around the world. So sometimes to have someone local that sits, in the same floor or in the same building or in the same country even, that have some knowledge about security, it sometimes helps that you have someone to come and ask those questions. So that's, I'm really supporting this approach. The second thing is you have to do secure code training to those people. You can have it in different languages, different skills. You can do it even in a fun way, to have some competition between the developers, and they can win some prizes or stuff like that, that will give them more drive to actually participate. But we do find it's very, very useful. Obviously, you will always have developers that have less interest to, let's say, be a part of it and to put effort on this. But it's a good thing that you always find those that actually wants to be a part and to learn and to be better in their development, let's say, experience. So secure training is also very important. You can have the balance between, not wasting too much time of them, but you can also find it, if it's even once in 6 months, once in a year, depends on your, on the size of the company and how many developers you have. And the third thing is obviously to have, I'm sure a lot of developers are using some, let's say, Confluence pages or any data sharing, like Wikipedia for the developers, that they have all the questions that they have usually. So you can use those pages to have some guidelines or some baseline, what you need to put attention to it once you develop, if it's secrets, input validation, tokenization and stuff like that it's very important once you develop. So, or encryption. So you can put some guidelines, what's the best way to deal with those, issues that are very common these days. And it will help them because they're working on this platform already. So it will be very easy for them to search for it, find the best practice, and just, implement it.
I'll rebound on that. There is a question we have from the audience that that kind of relates to that. And you've been talking about building, those checks and balance. And earlier you were talking about open source vs commercial solution. And one of the questions is exactly this: is it takes some time to build the open source or to build your own in-house controls and in-house security tool sets. Is how do you find the balance between, like, when is it better to go outside and get your open source, to get the commercial off the shelf, and when is it better to build your own tools? And I'd really love to hear as a practitioner. So let's start with you, Yaron, and then I want to hear from Baljeet on the same topic.
Yeah, sure. So it's a very good question. I would say it depends on the company. I would say maturity. Okay. If the company is, just started to develop and they're building everything from scratch and they're using some commercial tools, or let's say open source, known open source tools. So I would say it's probably much hard to start developing it in-house because you probably don't have enough resource or you don't have the expertise to actually do that, unless the DevOps himself doing as well the security. So it's probably better to use some commercial tools in that area. But let's talk about maybe a big companies, the enterprise companies that probably have tons of teams and different production, let's say, developing. I would say it depends on which languages. It depends, if you are doing a lot of stuff in-house, which is a self, let's say, developing that you're doing a lot. So I would say in that case, it might be useful to build something that is more integrated to your CI/CD pipeline or to your dev guys. Because sometimes the commercial tools could be a little bit maybe more hard to implement and integrate. But, for the basics like the SaaS tool or DAS tools, obviously there is no making sense to use, let's say, or build something on your own. Use the one that already exists in our world. You need to maybe adjust them and make them a little bit integrated to your CI/CD pipeline. You probably have a lot of fine tuning to do in the beginning, but once you settle this down, it will be much easier for them, on the ongoing sprints to deal with it. Very good.
Baljeet, do you share the same opinion? Have you found the same balance between building and buying?
If you ask me, I've had this discussion or this challenge posed to me for quite a number of times in the past, and where I think it's always down to a few key aspects. One is, what is the support expectation once a product that you create goes live? What is the kind of support? Are you going to do support in-house? Are you going to rely on a third party to support it? Two would be, what is the amount of funding that you're going to put into this? And obviously there's a benefit analysis that you need to do, whether if it's an in-house developed tool, is it cheaper as compared to in the long run, not in the short run, in the long run, is it cheaper to maintain as compared to a tool that you want off the shelf? And lastly, right, the advice I would give is always understand what is the lifetime of that tool. If you have something that is pertinent to your business running, it's something that is very important to have, very key. It's a key enabler to your services that you drive to your consumers. Then I say you need to have an in-house developed tool because you customize it to your in-house hooks, right? But otherwise, if it's something to do something that already is traditionally a standard service out there, I would say go to market, don't reinvent the wheel, and it will actually significantly push your go-to-market if those are the criteria that meet. So that's my advice.
Makes sense. Jan, obviously you're a security solution vendor, so you have a BS view on this on this topic. But let me ask you the burning question we can't avoid. We're in December and January. We had SolarWinds burning the news of security, so we couldn't avoid it. Has it changed something from an application security point of view, from your perspective?
Well, just to answer the previous question first, you should always buy a tool. No, just kidding. I mean, SolarWinds. I mean, I don't. From Synopsys' point of view, I think it's not something that, looking at our tools, we would have been able to detect. But I think it does shed light on the importance of the supply chain, right? Because you need to know where, what you are getting from your different suppliers, and so if it means that you're getting an executable, there's still tools that are available that can help you, assess the security of those tools. You can scan them, right? Or maybe you are getting source code from an external vendor, even if it's pre-built for you. If you have the source code, you should still be doing something about it. And then also, of course, then the question about open source as well, and looking at what vulnerabilities are there. Yeah, that's the things that I would look at.
I love your honesty, right? So tools won't solve and find everything. It's very important for everyone to have a good understanding of how their tools are being built and what's the whole pipeline. Baljeet, Yaron, did it change something for you? Was it a aha moment internally on saying, whoa, that's something we need to look into? Or is like, yeah, that's covered? Any of Baljeet, your mic is on, so 30 seconds on the topic.
No, I think you need tools, like it or not. You can't do away with tools, but you need to have the ability and the depth to maximize the usage of their tools and to what extent that tools can cover. So you need to actually have that understanding mapped out, and from there start building up that process. The process should be there, the governance should be there, the tool should just integrate into it. But when you buy a tool, you need to maximize the tool. That's what I firmly believe.
Yaron, 30 seconds on, did SolarWinds change something for you? And I think Yaron has frozen on the topic, so maybe we'll wrap it up. And I want to really thank everyone of the audience for participating to answer those questions. I hope you found this discussion useful to you, and I think you can reach out to Jan anytime if you need to dig into those topics. As a reminder, you have a handout if Synopsys has written this report that is very insightful on the state of application security and some key messages. So please take some time to download it. And I hope you had some time. You had a good time, and it was a good amount of good information for you. I personally really enjoyed this discussion, and I found it very useful to me. So I hope everyone had a good time. I want to thank all of you for attending, for taking an hour of your day to attend this. And I wish you a good day, and I wish you a good week and a good continuation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.